Welcome. I'm J. Michael Silver, and this is Foundational Steps, the show where I talk with people about the choices they've made in the past to get where they are in life. In this episode, I'm talking with Krishna Gandhi, founder of Psimonix, an EEG technology company that develops algorithms to measure substances in the body like cortisol, testosterone, and more. We have an amazing conversation about growing up between New York, London, and Mumbai, and her journey to founding Psimonix. Links to Krishna and timestamps for everything that came up while we talked are below. Please leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and check out our affiliate links and see if there's anything of value. Enjoy our conversation. Krishna, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael, for the invitation.
So I just want to jump in and ask you how you currently define yourself, and how, like, if you randomly meet someone on the subway or the underground, I guess, in London, how do you define yourself if someone asks, like, who are you?
I define myself as, well, if it was somebody I met on the underground, if you're asking me who am I, it's going to be a different explanation. But if it's someone random on the street and they were just asking me that, probably have like 2 minutes to answer. I'd just say I'm a neuroscientist and I'm a inventor, and I'm also a founder. So I'm just commercializing the invention and the findings and offering it to the world.
That's pretty awesome. And I'm sure they would go, oh, wow, because that's pretty awesome. Do you have, just because I think that's interesting, do you have different ways you would introduce yourself to in different circumstances? Are there times that you would hide that you're a neuroscientist or a founder or any of that?
Most of the time. It's really about the context.
Yeah.
I don't really like to put it out there if it's not relevant to
I get that.
So if you ask me on a conversation in terms of like consciousness and outside of that kind of definition that's related to what do you do in the system, it's a different answer. So
I get that. I mean, and that's actually a fantastic distinction too, to kind of touch on for a half a second, is that what you do in the system, versus versus not in the system, versus, I don't know, in a different reality. I don't know, like this gets really esoteric really quickly. But how would you define yourself outside of the system? Like, do you feel that you have an identity, or think of yourself as having an identity that doesn't have to do with kind of the world at large and education and business and commerce and everything?
Oh, absolutely.
And how would you define that?
I define myself as an explorer and a researcher, and somebody that's learning about what's happening and what's going on. Why am I here? What's the purpose? And living, from questioning, kind of living that. Very in a very focused way. So like everything is like okay, let's see what will happen. It's like
absolutely.
An experiment, like it's a big experiment.
It's a big experiment. Fantastic. And so neuroscience and being an inventor and a founder, this is just a way to engage with the rest of the world and be a part of society, or this other thing we're doing as humans.
It's kind of like the vehicle in which I can provide some value to the system, that's coming from this esoteric identity, right? Or that's coming from that space, because the system's there, that's fine, like a means to an end. But then we've got what we need. I think we've kind of, from my point of view, it's like, okay, we managed to create a system we don't have to watch our backs all the time.
Right.
And so, okay, that's great. Now, can I kind of explore like more, because my basics are met?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
now how can I actually really live this like this life, this human life, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of find the system's definition of life a little bit not very stimulating.
Right. Kind of gets monotonous and boring at times.
Sometimes, like, I just don't know why after my basics are met, you know, why there's no motivation other than like, you know, well, why would I do the same thing over and over again? It doesn't make sense. So it's a different outlook, but also with the research comes some insights, and it's like, you know, what's the actual value? Where's the value? And why are we chasing the value outside of ourselves? So there's so much to uncover. It's like, okay, I'm not going to mention any particular city, but you get these cities that like are just built, you know, and they've got like everything you need, you know, in this space, and it's very glamorous, and it's all, you know, everything, all the services, and it's gorgeous, and you know, the finishing and experience, but you step outside of that, and then it's nothing like that.
Yeah.
And even after a little while, get kind of like saturated with this similar stimulation, and it's like, okay, so now what? And so there's so much of that going on, that how many restaurants can you know, how many restaurants could I eat? And it's just eating.
Right.
It doesn't matter. Like after a while, how many rides? Like it's all the same ride.
Yeah.
So it's just you know, it's being like in a merry-go-round in a theme park, and then sitting on all the rides possible. But outside of that, like what else is going on? You know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting thing to explore from an idea and in practical, practical reality is, you know, when you go travel from city to city, and it's the in-between spaces where you're going to see stuff that's interesting, shocking, different. I think that's kind of relative to anything. It's the in-between spaces where you're gonna be surprised. I mean, we could go off on that on its own. I think we could go off on that for several hours. So let's come back to when did you find yourself, you know, in your body going, oh, you know, how I'm doing this actually affects the reality around you. You know, the system that we plug ourselves into for work and for career jobs and education and all these other things. Like, how did you first, or what was that first moment that you looked around and you realized the choices you make could actually affect, you know, the reality you were living in? And it could be any time. And I'm sure you've probably had more than just one moment, but was there a first moment? And that could be our starting place for exploring that idea.
So it's a really specific question, right? When do you first realize that your choices have an impact on things? And so I don't know, because there's lots of things that have been happening for so long, like from the very beginning. I don't really know which point I could say, though. The earliest point, I think, maybe when I didn't want to do something, you know, and that was like, I don't want to do this. Why do I have to? So we were in Disney. I remember this very clearly. I was in Disneyland, or Disney, well, in Florida,
Disney World.
Yeah, Disney World. And I remember it very clearly in my pink onesie.
How old were you?
I don't know. I was like 1.5 or something.
Oh, wow. That's an early memory. That's amazing.
Is it? Yeah. And then my dad, and we're watching this show, and we're sitting around, you know, watching this show, circus, I don't know what it was. And my dad's making me stand up on the bench to clap. And I just don't want to do it. You know, I just don't want to do it. Like, why do I have to do this? And I really remember that annoyance, that feeling that I don't want to do this. And that's kind
amazing.
Of I strongly remember that. So so those that kind of knowing that I don't want to do this and you're the other person, and this is, you're making that kind of distinction of like a level of consciousness, realizing that I'm not just that I'm not just mindless, like,
yeah, right.
there's a mental chatter, an awareness and thought process that's going on in my head. I don't want to do this.
And then I'm sure there was some sort of reaction, for however you were able to express yourself in that moment. There must have been some sort of reaction from your father as well. Well, and so that kind of got you pushed back on your pushing back.
Yeah, I mean, I still had to do it, but
well, you're 1.5. you probably weighed like what, 8 pounds or something?
Yeah, I was like,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was this little. I can't even remember. I was like super tiny, and I remember it. I do remember it, but I think it was back then, because that's when we were in. That's when we lived there.
Yeah.
So yeah. But
so as you got older, then there must have been a lot more moments where you're like pushing back, like, I don't want to do this. So at what age for you was the first time that you were able to actually get your way, or not have to do something?
An early memory. I think I may have been asserting myself after that.
Yeah. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, quite a somebody, like, I was very strong-minded, curious, quite bossy, I think, but very content in my own company. And always kind of busy. Like, my mom and dad didn't have to worry about me. I'd just get on with whatever, be playful. And
do you remember what kind of things that you would do to occupy yourself? What kind of games you'd play, or situations you would imagine?
Yeah, I mean, reading or making things, and music was like, just kind of
listening or playing.
Playing
what
just stuff like I don't know, like the harmonium, or like these Indian manjara things, or this tambourine, whatever. Only child syndrome. You just sit and make, you and keep yourself entertained. And then,
no, but it's interesting though that you have a memory, because I don't think other people, like, I feel like most kids, maybe all kids, play with instruments or play with sound makers, but to have some level of awareness that you were kind of, losing yourself in the music, I think is a different experience than just, here, child, play with this. Are you a musician now? Do you consider yourself a musician?
No, I'm not a musician. No. I play. I play. I might sing, but I wouldn't call myself a musician. It's just through, training when I was young. I did like Indian classical singing and harmonium for a few years, like 7 years when I was younger, and still remember parts of it. But I don't call myself a musician. That's just kind of, I have practice and learning and things like that. I just enjoy it. Like, I just enjoy, music, and I enjoy singing it. I also, like, funnily enough, my mum wasn't a believer at all at that time in God or anything, and that came later on in life. But I used to sit in the temple, and that's like, that is how I spent my time.
You used to sit or sing in the temple?
Sit and sing in the temple. Oh. Yeah. So that was just like, that's how I, like, although that's a funny one, because like my mother wasn't that religious at that time. She didn't actually believe it, as far as I know. That came up much later in life. So
how about your father?
Not much later. No, my father. No, not my father. Not my father.
So how did you end up in the temple then,
I
having?
mean, we have it in the home, but like, I don't know why. I'm not sure. I just used to. That's like always, literally. And then I was playing and singing in the temple one Sunday, and got given a statue of Krishna Bhagwan, and it's like Lord Krishna, like little Krishna,
Like
and
Krishna with
it's
the flute, or like baby Krishna?
baby Krishna.
Okay.
And I still have that statue today, you know. So yeah, like it's weird, but it's you know, people have imaginary friends, don't they?
Yeah.
But I didn't have an imaginary friend, but I just I don't know. I think I've always believed, and I didn't even know that I believed. Do you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
No, I get
Can't
that.
explain it.
My
Can't explain
father,
it.
my father's an atheist and an existentialist, as I think I mentioned earlier to you, before we started recording. And but his father found religion or spirituality later in life, after my father was out of the house and gone. And so um, when I was born, my grandfather cut us out of his life and disowned the family because I wasn't named after the last dead Jewish family member, and that's, a Jewish thing. I don't know if it's in other religious cultures or what have you, but when I was 4 years old, evidently there's some sort of timing with kind of uh, energetic awakening or something like that in Kabbalah. I don't really know for sure or understand it. I've heard different things from different places, but he decided no, he had to meet his grandson. And so for as long as I can remember, I had spiritual teachings, but without the religion. It was just ideas because my dad was so against, like, indoctrination. So my grandfather would just tell me these wild stories, and it just lit me up. It was like, yeah, that's reality. Like, reality is not this, it's not the blocks. It's something behind the blocks,
Mm.
or it's the in between spaces. Going back to that, um, and so I'm like you. I've always had some sense of, call it magic, spirituality, whatever, that there's more going on, and
Right,
this is,
there's something. Like the feeling of something always has been there.
yeah.
Like, and it's had its influence, that in my like navigation
Hmm.
of reality. So but I just want to, just as a very young child, I think I was very attached to my mom, and she used to say, like, you never used to let me sit down and be in the kitchen and things like that. So I was quite a good scapegoat for her, but at that time for cooking. But and then as I got older, as in like from maybe 3, 4 or 4 years old, got much more independent. And my so I've always been around my cousins, and I've my best friend, that, and there's three of us, but the one of me and my other best friend, we are literally together all the time since nursery and first school. And yeah, we'd be so creative together, we'd always be making and playing, to a point that they just by default just thought we'd always be together, either we're at this house or at her house.
Yeah.
And no parents didn't bother checking, they just assume we're at one house or the other.
Oh,
Like
wow.
literally, like it was like that all the time. And so we were really kind of we were geeking out, like we'd always be like doing math and science and painting and building things, and yeah, I mean, we really were super geeky up until like and she's an artist now, she's incredibly.
Oh,
And
wow.
then the third one came along as well, and she's amazing too. So because we live so near each other, and my cousins would come over in summertime, or we'd go to, I was between India, London and Mumbai, so
Mhm.
like, so there's always so many people.
Quick
around them.
side note, that's a really interesting distinction. You said between India, London, and Mumbai.
India, London, New York, sorry, New Jersey.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
That makes,
Mumbai is in India. Yeah.
yeah, that's why I was
Yeah, yeah.
confused. I was like,
Yeah, no, my
I
bad.
wasn't sure if Mumbai was considered kind of its own thing.
Mhm.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah,
New York. Yeah.
Mumbai, London, New Jersey.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you had the ability to experience such drastically different, especially, even 10 years ago before social media. I feel like those places were far more disparate, had their own kind of cultures and their own kind of things. I feel like maybe now with social media and the advent of communications so prevalent, perhaps they're become a little bit watered down. But those are three major hubs of the world that have their own spirit and their own um vibe. It's just so different.
Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely been an components, because that exposure has provided backdrops and for more new data points and information.
Yeah.
Culturally, also the different kinds of people in each location. Like there was like similarities, but then there'll be like these odd folks that are outliers amongst all of them in the area, but they were similar across the different cultures. And that unification, which is something that we talked about, was generally something of those people that were critical thinkers.
Yes.
And they were coming from different backgrounds and different cultures, and yet they converged on like a truth across those three cultures. And this is why, I think that's beautiful, because how can they converge on these kind of this outlook when they haven't had exposure to it? So it didn't really matter what religion or which culture or what language, but the commonality was that this thread of so that was really important, because then that was really important, because no matter, so in India, when I go to Mumbai, I'd be able to get exposure to, you see, the very comfortable aspects of life. And then, you walk out on the streets and you travel, and it's not always like that, right. And there's sometimes like the use of, the normal facilities are just, bathroom facilities, for example, at some places, it was like, it's difficult, right?
Yeah, I've not
now
been
it's different.
Yeah.
Now it's quite different. But at that time it wasn't like, the normal lavatory that we have and quite easily take for granted. It wasn't like a normal thing there. And but then people live so differently with less, but somehow have a wider smile on their face and a lot more joy in them. And that was interesting to kind of see as well. And the warmth and the warmth and the intimacy between kind of friendships that people make. They're so much more intimate, and relationships seem so much more intimate. And it's like people just walk into each other's space. How they what? There's no thank you, and there's no sorry, and there's no, because it's almost a formal barrier using the thank you and the sorry. So it's just like, wow, it's a whole different.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that in traveling myself, even just in America or in the United States, you go to some place that's more impoverished or smaller backwoods, kind of whatever that image conjures. And there is a much greater sense of, community togetherness. We're in this together, and life is tough, but, we're making the most of it. And I feel like as you kind of move into the cities, that sentiment is easily forgotten or left aside. And then it requires a level of, seeking or critical thinking to kind of come back to that ability to be happy in the best and the worst of situations, and just, doing what we do. And I mean, people are people. Like, if you read any old text or even ancient text, like, people have not changed in thousands of years. You've got people who are very conservative and uptight, and you've got people who are, critical thinking. You've got people that are just kind of kumbaya. Like, you've got all the spectrums throughout the world, throughout millennia, and not much has changed. Like,
Right.
our ability to communicate has changed, and that's about it. So as you were, going through life, I mean, this seems to be, you seem to have a great handle on seeing the differences and the advantages and the kind of levels of where people are thinking, and what they're able to do or not do. So this must play into becoming a neuroscientist. So at some point in time, you must have realized that this interest in how people think and what they're thinking, and how there's similarities between people across language and culture barriers are the same. At what point in time did you realize that this was all, like, super fascinating to you?
I think so. It was always fascinating, but I didn't know what word, I didn't know what discipline would kind of, approach that subject. I studied neuroscience in 2007, right?
Okay.
So 2007, 2008, right? That's when I did my master's in neuroscience.
Gotcha.
And
was that when you were doing your master's, was that when you kind of realized that, oh no, this is it, this is what I want to spend my time doing?
Yes, actually, I knew what I wanted to do before, and then this was the vehicle in which I had to study it, like, formally.
Gotcha.
As in to qualify it. So I so I didn't actually know, like, this is really bizarre, and I can't understand how I could not have known this, considering I was super studious and just, again, I suppose, living in the present. I think my parents just assume I would know what would happen afterwards, what the process is. Maybe they relied on my parents and not on the teachers to tell me.
Right.
I don't really know, but they didn't tell me, like, what this is crazy. No one told me about, like, this is what happens. Like, you go to high school, and then you go to college, and then you go to university, and then you kind of do this, and then you get married, and then you like, nobody told me.
Oh, that's funny.
This is crazy. So I was just like, even at teenager, not really thinking about all of that kind of, like, this vision and stuff. I'm only finding out about how my friends were thinking about them visualizing their future, like,
right.
Like, maybe only a few years ago, and I'm like, I never knew you guys were thinking. We were together all the time,
Oh,
but actually there was one point where we did say, like, oh, you guys are gonna get married, and I probably won't. I probably won't. Your children will come to my marriage, and this kind of, that was like off the cuff remarks. So that's about it. But so even in terms of university, and I didn't really know about the steps. And when someone would ask me, what do you want to be? I'd just say doctor, because that was, like, the standard thing to say.
Right.
Like,
it's a safe thing to say, where you're not going to get a lot of pushback, and people aren't going to grill you. Like, if you said, I want to be a dancer, people were like, wait, why? Really?
It was just so cool. Like, it was like the thing to say, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, like, fixing stuff and just doing things, and my granddad would, like, my dad's dad, he came over from India and staying with us, and he was like, just watching me. He's like, oh, my child, like, is going to be an engineer. Like, he was, like, saying it so proudly at that time. And I was like, okay. But no, actually, no real kind of
plan.
plan, no. And living really in the moment. I just think like this is really living in the moment.
That's amazing.
Yes, my teachers like at middle school, like they used to praise like us because we were always so studious, like always working, like be ahead of our homework, like maybe months of, like we'd have to do all these math kind of problems, and we'd just basically get through the whole lot. And he wouldn't have imagined that it would be like for maybe enough to keep someone busy for a couple of years, but we just like got on. Yeah, so we
but
would
you were
always
exploring, you were having fun with it, you would explore the idea and
we found it fun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it was quite competitive because we used to compete with the other boys in the class. But
I was part of the math club in high school, and it was kind of fun to go in and do these special tests and compete for who would get the equation the fastest and all that stuff. I was good at it, but I think I did it because my friends were doing it, not because it's like what I loved or wanted to do. It was just something kind of random and fun. My friends were doing it, I'm going to do it too. But yeah, it's interesting. So just to kind of
so I just to answer the question real quick. So then basically I fell upon it, and because I knew what I wanted to study, but I didn't know how to study it. So I found this, and I wanted to kind of just mark as a point that in this world, like it's difficult to find a point of anchor, an anchor of truth, because and I found my anchor of truth, and I had to follow the thread, and I followed the thread. So the thing I had to do was, okay, I know that we can measure mental activities, like what I'm thinking has a physical kind of measurable something that's physical, measurable. So I know that was my kind of anchor of truth. So that means like whatever I was thinking or doing would have like a physical manifestation at some level, at least on the level of the EEG. That was it. And so for me, I needed to follow that. And how do I follow it? Because essentially I need to understand how that makes up everything I know, because that was the only thing that I knew at the time. So I did philosophy, and that was my undergraduate. And I wanted to figure out how can I understand, the world, because I have to rebuild my world. Based on this one truth that I know. That's the only truth that I know. And so I explored it, recreating my whole web of belief based on that premise that I knew to be true, my anchor of truth, and chose philosophy of mind and philosophy of psychology as my optionals. And that allowed me to explore the vast kind of various models and theories and discrepancies and holes of the arguments, and which then, and like including computational neuroscience, so whole vast from clinical neuroscience to neuroimaging and computational neuroimaging and all sorts of models, until I could, with this kernel, this one anchor, this premise that I knew was true. How do I then build like truthful statements? Because that's what philosophy does, is that you have to check the premises that build this view.
I mean, to some extent, philosophy is a mathematical language. I mean, it's just using language in place of numbers. But it is equations and proofs and so forth. So that's interesting. And so your next leap into neuroscience was to take it on as, take your philosophical point of view onto to try to map it in a way that you could make it more tangible.
So then it's to approach this mind-brain relationship in a scientific way. So it's like it's much easier to have a good overview of what you're looking at and considerations, and think about all the various everything to consider about it first, and then kind of approach it in a scientific way. because otherwise it's a needle in a haystack, right?
Yeah.
So and so again, keeping to the thread that this relationship was measurable. How am I able to, what does that mean? What else can I actually bring that of value to some? How do I prove this?
Right.
So that neuroscience syllabus had come from MIT. It was like the first of its kind in this country, and they didn't have it before. It was at Westminster University. Actually, I made a mistake. I need to make a correction. It's neuropsychology. So lots of I'm meaning to do that. I keep forgetting. But applied cognitive neuropsychology. But it covered, you know, clinical neuroscience and neurons and computational neuroscience, and it was a beautiful, you know, a syllabus that covered everything I wanted to know.
Right.
And does justice to this mind-brain relationship. In basically, it was the neuroscientific. It was a scientific way to explore the philosophical, considerations of the mind. Yeah, of course. So now this was a natural extension for me, and luckily it was the first time that was introduced in this country, and I was able to be part of that course.
So at Westminster, they were adopting what they were doing. Did you say MIT or Harvard?
MIT.
MIT. That's what I thought you said. I don't know why Harvard stuck in my brain though. So this is the first time Westminster was adopting MIT's syllabus, and you got to be kind of part of the pilot to explore really a wide swath of information, data, and ideas pertaining to, you know, the human condition through the lens of neuroscience, neuropsychology, and, you know, and I'm sure neurobiology as well.
That's fascinating. Yeah, yes. And so then in my master's, in my dissertation project, I'd carried out this experiment, and I asked for an EEG machine. Like I asked instead of a car for my parents. So
that was your please, mom and dad, can I have a EEG machine?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's what I wanted. But actually, I was doing EEG work before my master's dissertation, so I was already doing that. I set up my company called Neurobeats and all kind of things to do this EEG. So I did an EEG training course. I kind of partnered with a neuromarketing company and worked with subcontracting with them, and worked in a clinic providing neurofeedback. And so then I had this machine that I could actually use in my project, and I managed to find your own
EEG machine to just play with, and then also use for your dissertation and for your, you know, scientific work.
Yes.
That's got to be abnormal, right? That's not like a normal thing for other neuroscientists to do, is buy their own EEG machine.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure.
That's fantastic. I would love to find out how many people have their own EEG machine, and I can't imagine there's many. It's got to be only a handful of people.
Well, I have 3 right now.
But this has also become your business though, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I feel like that's, you know, that changes the game a little bit. So I guess, what did you find out, or what, you know, it sounds to me, which is interesting because I don't feel like most people get this. But it sounded to me, not only did you have a singular focus, and it was growing, and you were discovering it as you went because you were so kind of focused in the moment and living in the now. But not only did you have that singular focus, but you were able to maintain it and cultivate it as you went and stay in that track. And it seems to have worked. Like, it didn't blow up in your face and go, well, shit, now what am I going to do? So, like, what were you finding out, or how were you balancing everything to keep it working? Like, you know, like, because there's got to be there had to be a lot of things that you were juggling, people coming at you, professors, friends, that could have pulled you off track or could have made you kind of miss whatever you found. But like, how did you stay on track? How did you, juggle it all?
Yeah, that's like the key question, right? Because this is why anchoring, your anchor.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find an anchor that is true, you cannot move from that point. It doesn't matter what the world says. It doesn't matter who says what. It doesn't matter what the consequences are. That is a premise in which it's unmovable. It's a foundation, right?
Yeah.
And it then builds it becomes a navigation tool to explore reality.
So
you could say I haven't. There wasn't a time where it could have been falsified. If it could be falsified, then sure, I'd have to review it. But I mean, I had done so much work because the first conflict is within myself,
mm-hmm.
and that was the hardest battle.
In what way, and what do you mean by that?
Well, most times you want to be able to trust yourself.
Yeah.
Right. At least in terms of what you see or hear or feel or think, you think you can. Most people take it for take it for granted and take it that that's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't even able to do that. So I was still kind of questioning, like, right, so I'm experiencing like my visual system. This is my visual system. This is my auditory system. This is how I'm feeling. And like, is that really how I feel? Or is that really
mm-hmm.
coming from me? Or is that really what I'm seeing? I can't even trust my senses
Mm-hmm.
to tell me what's going on. And then when other people are saying things that don't seem aligned with, doesn't seem logical,
Mm-hmm.
that it's got no chance. if I can't even trust my own, if I'm questioning my own senses, right? So in terms of like the first battle was to try and find a foundation in myself to be able to even explain like how far can I trust my visual, how far can I trust my senses
mm-hmm.
to relay information to me, and the limits of that information to provide a picture of the universal.
Mm-hmm.
And so that knowing the limitations has been incredibly liberating, because it's just telling me that it's just not it's not complete anyway.
Yeah.
So that was the first battle.
That's interesting. So I can't say I really trust my senses. I've had eye issues. I've had 5 surgeries on my eyes. So I've never been able to fully trust my eyes. I trust them well enough to be able to drive or, whatever. But beyond that, I know that my eyes will miss things. And so I know that I have to use my other senses to pick up things that my eyes aren't picking up. But I also know that I have an incredibly strong sense of smell, but sometimes I can block smells out. I don't know how the hell I'm blocking smells out, but like if I key in, I'm like, then it's like, oh yeah, I smell that. But somehow or another, like I completely missed it. And it was like, something you'd think, oh, like, how would you gonna miss, like, I don't know, fresh muffins? But it's like, I just missed it. Like I was smelling something else. I just missed it. So like I have a long history of like you, not really trusting my senses and using them the best that I can. However, I don't think I ever worried so much about the limitations. I just knew like this body's limited, my sensory experience is limited. And I think I, after that, relied on, to a certain extent, either, what people call their sixth sense or intuition, kind of the esoteric side of things. And often, I have faith. To me, isn't about religion or spirituality. Faith to me is about the ability to let go of the things that you can't know and accept that, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. Like when I was younger, I had no idea why the sun was going to rise or why it was going to set. I knew it did that, and I had faith it was going to come back the next day. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I started understanding the systems behind that. And so for me, anytime I don't know what's going on, I rely on faith. It's like, well, it's happening, so it doesn't really matter at the moment. If I can figure it out later, if I care enough or have the time, or I can find someone to explain it to me, great. Otherwise, I'm just going to accept this is how it works for now, and I not try to put too much onto it. But it's interesting, to a certain extent, there's some similarities, but you also were really geared towards finding, within the idea of, the neuroscience and the neurophilosophy, you were really geared towards finding how it defined, and how it's defined, and how you define it, and where your limits are. That's a really interesting distinction. Have the way you would define your anchor, has that changed?
Yes, it's moved, because it's still true, but it's moved because there's a more information to build a bigger foundation on which that stands, and that moves to faith as well. So that faith is not faith if it's easily jittered. There's right. There's a rationale. Like, to me, it makes perfect sense. It's just like, well, to me, it's just like, it's like, it's not going to sound like very like it's faithful as such, but I find that it's mechanical. Like, I can't not, like, it's not just faith for the sake of faith.
Right.
Like, it's part of the ontological system. Like, that's how things are. So I can't move it from faith, because to me it makes perfect sense. I mean, to use the sun as an example, just because it's a really easy, obvious, thing, I could see that its path, after, I don't know, a couple days or whatever, you see that there's a pattern, there's a path. And once there's a pattern and a path, then there is a system in which that this thing works in. And it's probably extremely complex, and you can be looked at simply, and like, I just accept that, okay, there's a system behind this, and I have faith that this is how it works. And for it to change would require some massive shift in either reality as we know it, or some cosmic thing. And as I got older, that became more and more true and more obvious. And so I totally get that. Just for anyone, just in case anyone's lost, that might be listening to this, what's the easiest way to define what your anchor is? Because we're talking around it a lot. So just in case anyone was like, what's her anchor? Like, because right, so everyone could have their own anchor. For me, my anchor that I thought was the only true thing to me, it even over my senses, was that the mind, this intangible thing, has an impact, has an effect in the physical. And how can it be intangible if it has a physical impact?
Yeah.
And so it can be intangible, but it's not. We kind of stick it into the whole imaginary woo category, as if it's not actually there. I mean, most of the time we live, but we kind of don't. We treat it like it's a second secondary thing. Actually, no, it's a primary thing.
Yes.
And it is such a big part of the machine.
Yes.
So, you know, I think in the last, I don't know, maybe at least this side of the world, you know, in the last 20-ish years, has become a bit, the mindfulness has become a lot more prominent in people's life and the way they live. But at the time, at least from in my worldview and where I was, it wasn't really something that people acknowledged in the way that. So it was a real kind of it just confused me completely, and I couldn't understand why people do anything. I know I had this huge existential crisis at the age of 9 when I saw the size of the universe, and I could understand the size of the solar system. Sure. You know, it's a Reader's Digest book, and I can understand that. And even then, it was really vast.
Oh yeah, it's massive.
But when I turned the page, and it was just like so many Milky Ways, and then there's just this like arm of the Milky Way with this arrow pointing to like nothing, like I can't even see on the page, and that was our solar system. That just like frazzled my brain.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one galaxy, and there's trillions of galaxies. Yeah.
I just can't understand. I was like, so what is the point of any of this? Like, what is the point? Are we just, the question was like to my mom and my cousin, like, are we just robots? Like, how do we work? Do we need batteries? Like, how comes, and these are the kind of things that used to preoccupy my mind. And you know, I used to have nightmare for so many years. And I think these kind of questions also then interacted with reality that brings answers in such unusual ways, because like it was such a strong kind of, it used to really consume a lot of my mind and my time.
Yeah, so, I mean, those are big questions, and once you grapple with them, I think it's very difficult to put them down. And if you put them down through faith, and you say, I accept this is not something I'm ever going to understand, and I just need to back away because it's, you know, it's blowing my mind. And there are people that do that, I think, and they just trust, and they have faith and they let it go. But other people like yourself, like me, you know, we like to grapple with bigger concepts, and we like to play. And, you know, for you, you're making a career of it. And, you know, for me, in my way, I'm making a career of it. And it's interesting, I think, to, you know, to look at how that affects us. And, you know, to some extent, everyone's living within this reality. And, you know, how we engage or don't engage dictates everything. And, you know, the more we engage, the more power we have to guide our lives and to help guide others. And the less we engage, the more at the mercy of, you know, the currents we are. You know, that's you know, part of the podcast, part of the point of the podcast is to get people, you know, more engaged, you know, in the currents of their life, so that they have more ability to guide where they're going and where they want to go. And, you know, your work, obviously, you're giving people more power to do the same thing in just a completely different way.
Exactly. I mean, you summarized it right there. That's the point, and the endeavor, and the love behind it all.
Yeah.
You know, literally, it's all like absolute love from, you know, and it's it's coming from love, and it is love, and you know, that's, and it means to, you know, help empower the individual to realize their own inherent value. Because this is the thing, like, we're seeking value outside, when actually the values in each individual who has the will to manifest their thought. That's where the value is, right? It doesn't matter then if it's a little bit difficult here and there or whatever, but that's fine. That's not here or there, you know. Right. So and when I mean the anchor, and this is like the kind of I would highlight this, because if we spend some time to try and find some anchor, it doesn't matter what it is, but something that you really feel that this is really true for me, and stick to that, so that it kind of, it doesn't, there's a point of, does it make sense? It's a reference point, it becomes a reference point. So somebody says anything, there's a reference point to check it back at. If there's no reference point, everyone's just floating aimlessly, right? There's no reference point. There's nothing to check it against. It's okay if we move. It's all right to move or iterate or move the anchor, but check it against something before getting kind of taken away off of course completely, aimlessly, because then we don't kind of create our own navigation tool and realize our value in how we can in exploring our individual experience, this reality in our individual way. Otherwise we get kind of taken away by other people, as you said, the currents, right? And that's okay, but then make that the anchor, and then how do you then live so that becomes that's so aligned that becomes leading one to a truth that brings one's kind of full purpose, and that allows one to fully live fulfilled without needing to chase the value outside of themselves.
Right. And I mean, to put just a slightly different perspective on have your anchor be like flowing in the current. I know people, and I'm sure you've met people or know people, and other people, out there know people that seem to just kind of float through life, and they're anchored to the idea or to their kind of their ship, if you will, that's what they're going to do. They're just going to float through life, and they're going to just navigate the currents. And, some of these people are extremely successful. Some of them are successful, but you wouldn't ever know it because they don't have like the normal house and car and, that people think of as success, but they're living their life, and they're finding the most interesting things, ending up in the most interesting places, have the most amazing stories, because their anchor is like their ship, and their ship is just constantly on the move. That's pretty awesome. So I want to kind of tie it up for today, and I think there's so many different things we talked about that we could go on for hours. But before we wrap up, do you have any practice, like mindfulness, meditation, breathing, art, anything that is a channel for you to decompress, or handle and manage the stress? Do you have any specific practices that you've been doing?
Sure. So the Vipassana is a fantastic technique to practice. They've got Vipassana centers all around, dotted around the world. There'll be a center, near anyone. You just Google it. But and there's a link on the Vipassana website. It's like a 10-day course. Like the first time anyone does it, it's a 10-day course, and it's required because we basically put ourselves in a situation where complete
cut off,
lack of stimulation of the senses. So that's the logic. You cut off, but the logic is you just don't stimulate any of your senses. So what you end up doing is watching the mind actually in its own essence, because it's not preoccupied churning new data, right? So it's not like looking at visuals, or not distracted with sound, or not distracted with music, or no, it's just like still. So what happens is we end up observing the mind in its own natural state without it being slightly churning sensory data. And it's interesting because I don't know how many people will get a chance to ever do that. So a 10-day course
in the billions.
Exactly. and this is it. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful.
How
to
old
do.
were you
And
when
it's
you
10
found
days. It's
Vipassana?
free, and everything's taken care of. I knew about Vipassana, but I didn't sit the course until I was 29.
Okay.
So that was in 2009, and I'm 42 now. So, you know, I've done a few courses since then, but
Yeah.
And it's an amazing tool to have, and it also, and the philosophy behind it as well. But you know, this is a practical technique.
Yeah.
So, and then there's just your general outlook about, there's a neuroscience aspect of cortisol. I mean, this is what I do, cortisol, stress in the EG in the mind.
Yeah.
So, you know, stress it's why it's so interesting is because the mind, if we change our mind, we can change our physiology.
Yep.
And this is why, you know, the hormone cortisol to me is so interesting as a biomarker, because there's where we can capture this mind-brain interaction.
Mm-hmm.
So even in a neuroscientific point of view, like, it helps to manage stress, just knowing that.
Yeah, for sure.
And the practice, and breathing techniques are also just kind of, don't let it kind of tighten up in certain parts. So Vipassana helps us get there as well, because we can see tightening places in our body where we store stress. People store it in different places, and that can lead to health issues in the long term.
Oh yeah.
But so and Vipassana helps to release these the stresses in our body.
That's fantastic. Yeah, it's really interesting. I became aware of Vipassana a long time ago, but I've never done the 10 days. At some point in time, maybe I will. I've had a mindfulness practice, you know, since I was a child, and different forms of meditation. I've played with all kinds of different forms of meditation, and moving meditation has always been something really important to me. You know, whether it's, you know, simple as going for a walk or a run or bike ride, and just kind of getting into a zone and being somewhere where I can just kind of, you know, get into that rhythm, or like qigong exercises when I was a little kid. Like, that was actually one of the first things that I learned. I think I was 5 or 6. I learned qigong exercises, and some basic moving meditation, and then I've been playing with that forever. But it's so amazing.
This is the thing, if we take one thing and just do it, like, and stick to it and have a thread, it will get somewhere.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, it will reach. So if it is through training and getting into that zone, like you said, to get into that rhythm, and it's like, okay, then that will also get to a particular like there's this story about the well. I don't know if you've heard it, but you know, if you want to find water, you know, teachers asking students to find water, right? You start digging, and you've got to dig all the way, right, until then you'll find some water. But we keep stopping every like 2 days a week, we're never going to get there, right? And keep digging a new hole, but we're never going to find water. Right. So it will converge. It will, because it all converges, because it's all a truth. It doesn't matter which part we pick. But if we pick it and stick to it, like hold the thread and follow it, it will take us to uncover the same truth.
Yeah,
you know,
100%. I have on my calendar, it's a repeating notification, because we'll add notes and, you know, make changes. But it's the note on my calendar is something to the effect of pick one. They all lead the same place. And so I've been keep on adding notes to, like, I don't know if I'll write a book one day about it. But I feel that you just got to pick something that suits your life and just stick with it. Doesn't matter what it is. And, you know, if you want to be super active for the rest of your life, then some sort of moving meditation is probably like a yoga, like a vinyasa, you know, type yoga would be really good. If you're not don't have a kinesthetic, aptitude, or don't want to be super active, then there's a million other things you could pick, and just pick one that suits your life. They all get to the same place.
That expresses who you are and
Yeah,
how you
exactly.
want to do it.
And that's
because
part of
it's diverse and there's so much
Yes.
creativity, and it can't be all the same anyway.
Right. And that's part of the beauty, I think, of the modern world, is we actually can share these things and share different modalities that might not have been found years ago, but like someone really needed Vipassana, and they're hearing this and they're like, oh my God, I've just found my thing. I've looked and I've tried other things and nothing works, and now I found my thing.
Right.
I mean, it's like, that's the beauty of diversity, is like, whatever your thing is, it's out there. You just need to find it.
Mm-hmm. That's it. But it converges. That's the beauty. It converges.
Yeah.
And this is why, like, I find that although there's different religions, to me, it's just a different way to connect to God, a different name, not different religion, different, if you call it universe, you can call it energy, you can call it, I don't know, whatever you want to call it.
Same thing, different language.
Right.
Yeah, or vocabulary. So the difference between getting into being a neuroscientist or a lawyer or whatever, I think, is just language, because ultimately we use the same systems to come at anything and everything, where, everything is related to everything else. And the language may change, the vernacular may change, but it's all the same thing. It's all it's all the same thing. Anyways, what do you have going on? And I mean, I'll put it in the show notes, but how can people find you, and what have you got going on? What are the kind of the highlights?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Krishna Gandhi handle. Often on Clubhouse, there's some interesting groups of people and conversations on there. That's where we found each other.
Yep.
And in things going on, we have our product ready to launch soon. It has been, but there's been, there's lots of things happening in the background, and it's exciting times. There's a time where it's a place where the market's ready for it. So
and what's just because we didn't really touch on it before, what's your website, and what will your product do for people?
So the website is www.Psimonix.com. That's the name.
And I'll
of the
put that
company.
in the show notes for sure.
Okay. And we're providing a service where you can measure your hormone levels from your brain data. So your EEG data, you just put a headset on, measure it for 30 seconds, and you can measure your hormones between 30 seconds and 3 minutes. And you can measure your hormones within the clicks of a button.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Awesome, Krishna. This has been a pleasure. I'm sure we'll talk again. Don't forget to leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. New episodes every Tuesday, and check us out on YouTube for short clips from each episode. Thank you. And until next time, remember, your life story is yours to write and rewrite as many times as you want.